Okay, deconstructing another multiphonic. This one's a little bit more complicated. Ones I've done before have tended to be single fork, so they're fingering where there's a single hole in the middle of it somewhere. So a single hole lifted up, that's straightforward. This one is a double forked fingering, so it's basically G sharp, the standard G sharp fingering, but with the middle finger of each hand taken away. So just for clarity, and that's what thumb hole on as well, of course. So that's thumb, left 1 is on, left 2 is off, left 3 is on, right 1 and 3 are on, right 2 is off, and G sharp is on. See if I can get this multiphonic going. Oh, this multiphonic is also from Heather Roche's 27 Easy B-flat Clarinet Multiphonics blog. Okay, straightforward. It's not a bad one. Also, note I'm using a very light reed. I've only got a 2 reed on this because I can't play harder reeds. So, deconstructing it, the shallow mauve tone, the lowest pitch. That's coming from, as we've seen in other videos, if we take off all the fingers except the lowest first open hole, so that hole there, which is open, the first hole that's open between the reed and the rest of the clarinet, so that is the air column that's giving us that lowest pitch. So if I take the E, so that would be an E fingering, and then load it by adding on the rest of the fingers of the multiphonic, one by one. So you hear how that changes it. You also hear how it's the first couple of fingers that make the big difference in that loading. The first one obviously sits quite close to the upper tube, so it's going to drag it down a bit pitch-wise. That one, because the mechanism means it's closing that hole up there, so that hole is very close to where the main terminator is, the terminator hole. So that gives us the shallow mauve pitch, and let's try the rest of the multiphonic. For me, to get that, I'm relaxing my embouchure a little bit and blowing a little bit more from the back of the throat. So let's isolate that middle pitch. It's tricky. There's a couple of things going on there. That one, which is basically a G sharp 5. Oh, and our low pitch is more or less a D. So that G sharp 5 that we've got in the middle where's that G sharp 5 coming from? There's a few different ways of looking at that. Multiphonics we usually think of as being two separate columns of air vibrating. We know the low pitch, the shallow mauve pitch, is coming from the column of air from the reed to there. We also know that higher pitches have a tendency to bypass open holes sometimes, so they can go, on some multiphonics, the higher pitch can be generated by the lowest closed hole. On single forks, that seems to be the case a lot of the time. On a double fork, it's a bit more complex. So you'd expect it to maybe be a harmonic of that C sharp, sorry, the G sharp, the lowest key, but that doesn't seem to really make sense. If we play just the G sharp on its own, so that's undoing the 2 forks that make up the multiphonic. And then I'm just going to half hole those 2 forks individually to see if they pull out either any harmonics of the low G sharp. That's interesting. So if I half hole that one, I get what might be a flat 5th partial. You expect the 5th partial to be a compound major 3rd above it, but a C, but getting a flat one. But then if I half hole that one, I get what sounds like the actual 5th partial, which is a little confusing because it could be, because clarinet harmonics tend to be flat anyways, just because of the nature of the instrument. And this flat reed, this very light reed, is going to make them even flatter. Light reeds make higher pitches flat. Then it's possible that the pitch I'm getting from this, which sounds like a fifth partial, might actually be sixth or seventh partial, but flattened so much that it now basically sounds like a fifth. So that's a little confusing. So let's open those holes fully and see what effect that has. That is the pitch that wants to come out if I try and isolate the altissimo. Can't really pick out the things in between that, but it's definitely not one of those harmonics. So where's that coming from? Could be coming from there, could be just a further higher up harmonic. Let's try playing it with the full multiphonic again. Okay, so the multiphonic seems to want to stay separated from that major third right up the top. Perhaps that major third is just a component of something within the multiphonic. Let's try one other way of looking at this. So if the low pitch, the shallow mode, comes from that air column, from the reed to that open hole, and then we're loading that, which causes that to flatten. What happens if we assume that rather than thinking of this as a vent for the G sharp, maybe this is a vent for this terminator hole? So if we assume that there's a air column that goes from the reed down to this hole, which is open, let's close this finger and see if the higher pitch is a harmonic of this hole. So that would give us, if I take off the low stuff, and then so I'm using that terminator now, and I've closed that hole completely. And if I put on, terminator, by the way, is hole where the air comes out that makes the pitch, where the column of air stops. So you're generating pitch at that hole. If I load that then with the two bottom fingers, so we're getting that. So let's try overblowing that. Let's just use register key for a second. Okay, so we've got third and fifth partials. Let's try loading that. That's interesting. I'm going to take off the register key again. So as soon as I put on the G hole, really disrupts it, but I can stabilize that. So it does sound like that note there is a harmonic of that hole. And so now if I pull off this middle finger, let's half hole it first and then fully remove it to see if this is acting as a vent. That seems to be where our upper pitch is coming from. So our shallow pitch is coming from this column of air from this terminator here to the reed. One column of air there, that's forming the shallow pitch, which is then flattened by the loading on those other fingers. So it's being dragged down from what would be an E down to a D, kind of flattish. The next pitch up, the G sharp, appears to be coming from, we haven't really figured that one out. Let's go back to that one. So the top pitch, what was down as a kind of a C sharp, that seems to be coming from this terminator hole down here and overblowing to the fifth partial, which is facilitated by this hole being open as a vent. So this hole is venting the fundamental here, suppressing what would be that and overblowing it to, but with the addition of those two lower keys, changing the intonation. And also, crucially, opening it up to multiphonic. What's the difference between the half hole and the fully open hole? So it allows the multiphonic to happen for some reason. Half holes have a tendency to suppress low frequencies because low frequencies can escape through even tiny holes, whereas tiny holes will allow higher frequencies to pass through them. So that's why the half hole has a tendency to suppress the entire multiphonic. So the last part then is the G sharp. Where's that coming from? I'm having to do a fair bit of underblowing to be able to get that out to individually. It is possible that it's coming from the loading of the E and an overblow of that, which is maybe why I'm not able to bring it out so easily. So if I take the E and use that, then use the register key to overblow that to the third partial. And then load that. That was interesting. Quite a jump when that finger comes on. Quite hard to isolate, but that's our G sharp, I think. Yep. So it seems likely then that G sharp in the middle is coming from what would be an overblown, well, basically the shallow pitch, which is the E flattened to D by loading. Its third partial is also present in the mix. Unsure exactly where it's coming from or what's venting it out. Something must be. It could just be interference from down here is allowing that to be vented. It's not quite clear, but I think that shows where those partials are coming from. And it also explains why it's quite difficult to bring that one out.